You can find eerie stories in almost every corner of these isles, thanks to its long and often bloody history. From witch trials to dangerous criminals lurking in our city's shadows, gruesome tales of tortures to battlegrounds stained with blood. And all that history leaves ghostly footprints on our present. But let's face it, for centuries we've loved to listen and recount those eerie tales of our homeland. In books, on screens, but the oldest and my personal favourite is oral storytelling. There's just something slightly more chilling when someone recounts these tales out loud, all the while your imagination runs wild. So I'm here to take you on an excursion, off the beaten path and into the shadows, to hear from local experts about eerie tales right on their, and possibly your, doorstep. My name is Amy Gill, and I have always been fascinated by the dark stories from across the country. So, come with me as we embark on our very own eerie excursion. For this week's Eerie excursion, we're in the iconic city of York. Now, in case it wasn't obvious, York is located in North Yorkshire, and according to Visit York, it's perfectly placed between London and Edinburgh, hence its importance in British history. New York has seen almost everything from Romans to Vikings to some of Britain's most beloved celebrities. Shout out to Dame Judi Dench here. And its most iconic features include York Minster and the historic Roman walls that enclose it. And showing us around today is Mark.
It's Mark Graham, and I conduct the original Ghost Walk of York. We regard ourselves as the first ghost walk, not only in York and Britain, but possibly the world. It was an original idea to take people on an exclusive ghost tour of a city. And we've been doing that now for over 50 years.
As he's been doing this since 1973, Mark has some great stories to tell us, and we meet outside of York Minster on a clear but very cold day.
Well, York is quite remarkable in its history because every sort of period of history, from the Romans, Vikings, Georgian, medieval, everywhere, every period of history is on show in the city. And it's quite special for that. We have some of the oldest medieval houses in Britain with lots and lots of Roman remains. And it was a great Viking centre. We get our language in a way, our accent from the Danish Vikings. So you can come and see all that all around you.
Yeah, I feel like, because I've been to York before, I feel like the Vikings are definitely very, very celebrated here.
Yeah. Well, we have a Viking festival in February.
Oh, nice.
Which is really popular, really good. And we, on our Ghost Walk, we try and include a few tales that have a Viking origin, sort of rare tales of the Viking sagas that have a York origin, influence, if you like.
Our first stop is around the side, or back, depending on which way you're approaching the Minster, where Mark stops outside a house that dates back around 1,000 years. The gates are locked, but you can still see the front of this incredible house. And Mark tells me one of York's most famous ghost stories.
So here we are outside York Minster. Underneath York Minster is massive Roman remains. In the house here, which is one of the oldest houses in Britain, goes back 1,000 years as it stands. And beneath that is Roman remains. And it's with the Romans that we have our most famous ghost story. Harry Martindale was 18 years old in 1953 and was working in the cellar of this house. Now, at that time in the 1940s and 50s, there'd be what we call unsophisticated archaeological discoveries. By today's standards. One of those discoveries, Roman remains, was in this house. They unearthed, should I say, a square yard of Roman road, and the base of what they believe was a Roman column. And that's where Harry Martindale, 18 years old, is working. 1953. His job was to chisel a hole through a wall so he could put a pipe through for the central heating. The chisel broke. He had to get another. It was a cold February morning. He was cheesed off. He had a lot on his mind, a lot of responsibility. His first proper job on his own. He's up a ladder when he heard a bugle horn, or better described as a coach horn, approaching. From out of a wall in front of him stepped a Roman soldier. The helmet first. He screamed, fell off his ladder, scampered into a corner and watched as at least 20 Roman soldiers walked through this wall. He could see them in fine detail. Round shields, swords, spears, helmets, badly dyed green leather kilts and tunics, bearded. He could only see them, though, from the knees upwards. He couldn't see the lower leg, the foot, until they passed over that little bit of excavated road, and he could see the top of the feet. He ran out, he told everybody, and nobody believed him. Well, the caretaker did, but that's another story. He was investigated, interrogated, if you like, interviewed all his life by experts, Roman experts, archaeologists, historians, and he stood the test of time of all of them. Now, we are in possession of some old tapes that were made over 50 years ago, and we're going through them now. They're quite fragile. And I've looked through Harry's original description and tape, and it reminds me of what he told me, because he took me on my first ever ghost walk. He's no longer with us now, sadly, but he took me on my first ever ghost walk, and he explained to me that people write his story out, they talk about it, it's been on film, but people always forget the most important part. They remember how many Romans, what they wore, where they were, what they looked like. They don't remember the effect it had on him. And he said, I was terrified, absolute terror. He said, I was in a confined place and all this happened in front of him. He was terrified that one of the Romans would turn their head and see him, but they didn't.
They were just going past.
Yeah.
As though they were just marching.
As if a film show, he described it as.
Yeah.
So that's the story of the treasure's house.
That is incredible. I can see why Harry would get so upset, because when you tell the story, it's like, well, it's the idea of it's just a photograph, it's the ghost thing, so there doesn't seem to be anything terrifying. But I could imagine in that moment, as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, people don't think or appreciate what it meant to him in his life. He became very religious, and he became a policeman. He was always known as the haunted policeman. But he stuck to his story all his life. He was quite a gentleman, a kind-hearted man.
That's good. At least he stuck to his story. Never changed.
Yeah.
And what was it like meeting him when you took on that?
Well, I was hoping to become a ghost guide, you see, and they said you should go with Harry. He's the man. And I didn't really fully appreciate that. The shock actually was that I didn't know when he turned up that it was him and his story. I knew the story, but I didn't realise. Oh, and I was just a bit in awe, really. But it was very matter of fact and very gentlemanly, nice, kind fellow to say, and very helpful in all his things, and he'd answer any question you had. Yeah.
And other than Harry, has there been any other Roman sightings in this spot in particular? Has there been any other sightings since then or anything similar?
Well, there is an old story that we have of the one of the caretakers, and they had a daughter, and they used to sleep in one of the upstairs houses there, rooms there. And the daughter said she keeps hearing a bugle horn, and she and as if lots of people are moving about, like walking up and down the street. And they said, no, there's nothing. But that fits in. It's just before.
Okay.
Yeah. Since then, you'd have to ask them.
Oh yeah.
Because it's National Trust now.
Have you ever been inside the house?
Oh, many times, yeah.
Is it nice? What sort of facade is it now? Is it because it looks to me? You say that it's very old, but to me it looks a bit like a Tudor house.
Well, no house ever stays the same. They're always altered it. The entrance there, as you go through that door, there's a staircase, and I've heard people say that they've got to the top of the stairs and they've been pushed back.
Oh, really?
As if there's something invisible pushes them. Even some felt like a hand on the shoulder. Yeah, so it's it's a creepy one, that.
It is a creepy house indeed, at least from the outside. But there are so many ghosts and we have so very little time, so we head away from the Minster and through York's city centre. It's a packed day with people coming to the city for Christmas shopping, tourists soaking in the quaint streets, and eventually we get to what's considered one of, if not the, most haunted pub in England, the Golden Fleece.
Yeah, so we're at the back of the Golden Fleece, 1503. It's one of the great pubs in York that people I urge to explore. There's 4 ghosts and 5 bedrooms, or is it 5 bedrooms and 4 ghosts? Whichever it is, it's worth a trip, and even to stay the night. Really special. One of the ghost stories is of a Canadian airman who went for a night out there in 1945. He was staying at the back of the hotel, but found himself rather unwelcome on the top floor, and he fell out of the window and broke his neck. He's possessed the place ever since, as a shape, as a shadow. Mr. Munro from Saskatchewan, Canada. The oldest pub is just further down. It's called the Black Swan. Great little pub, haunted by a choking sensation. It's not unusual to see people collapse at the bar. People that stop the night will maybe sleepwalk for the first time in their life, and they'll be led by some icy hand through the dimly lit corridors into all kinds of peculiar places like cupboards and other people's bedrooms. But there's a feature in the Golden Fleece that I'd like to show you. Let's go. Okay, well, what I'll just say about the Golden Fleece is that they say there's no foundations. It's very old, and the houses either side keep it up. But you'll notice inside that all the floors are uneven and all the walls are crooked. So it's a great quirky pub.
It's very, very much like tucked in. I almost didn't see it.
Yeah.
That sheet.
Yeah, it's for the seekers of originality. So the Golden Fleece has on display lots of stories and lists of ghosts and whatever else. But there is something very special inside that nowhere else you'll find.
As we head into the pub, it's warm and cozy and also full of people enjoying a nice midweek drink. The only spirits to be found, for now, are the ones at the bar. I'm so sorry, but obviously I had to make that joke.
So as you see, it's a great little pub.
Yeah. I feel like we've just come down a roller coaster.
There's a little room at the front and a bigger room at the back. As you go down this corridor, look up.
Oh, wow.
Because above your head, looking down at you, are death masks.
Oh, wow.
The heads of dead people looking down at you.
Is there anyone of note?
As far as I'm aware, I'm the only one up there that's still alive.
Oh, wow.
Yep, still alive. You'll have to find me now, won't you?
So, if you're ever in the Golden Fleece and wondering what our guide looks like, As you go through the corridor that links the front room to the back, look up and he's the first death mask on the right.
The ex landlord and landlady, Steph and John, they loved all the ghostly goings on, and they really got into it. Did lots of research, etc. But they decided, I don't really know why, but they decided to do these death masks, maybe for the future as a business. And they needed guinea pigs to practice on, and I was one of them. You had to be clean shaven, otherwise it sticks to you. And they put a mask on you for about half an hour, sat in the cellar, and you just breathe through a straw. Some people find it a bit freaky, a bit. I nearly fell asleep. And the death masks, if you look at them, they don't have any eyes in them.
Yeah.
And they were going to paint some eyes on, but when they did that, it didn't look right, they said. Yeah. So they left them au natural.
Well, the masks certainly add to the spooky atmosphere of the pub. And as Mark said, you are able to stay in the rooms above. Or for those not brave enough, it's just certainly worth a visit for a drink. And whilst you're there, other ghosts you could encounter include a young Victorian boy who was trampled by a horse. Now he's been spotted in the top bar, or perhaps One-Eyed Jack, believed to be from around the 16th or 17th century, and carries a pistol, and he's seen at the bottom bar of the pub. Now, as we leave the Golden Fleece and head to our next location, Mark tells me more about the work he's doing to rediscover some of York's ghost stories.
Because all the ghost stories told in York, mainly anyway, were first recorded by a historian and businessman at Peterborough, John Mitchell. I worked for them, and they interviewed people and recorded it, and then they put it into a book or features, articles. But we didn't think they'd kept the tapes, and they've been rediscovered after 30 years. And we're going through them, a bit fragile, some of them, but a lot of the information that led to all the stories, there's much more in the tapes, because they couldn't use all that information, because family members or one or two famous people that are mentioned, or things that are mentioned, and they're reluctant to, until they got verification.
And it's in this next location where Mark tells me about a celebrity ghost.
So we're now in the courtyard of another great little pub, the Blue Boar. It's built about 1733, they say, but it houses a wonderful piece of history. And we'll go down into the cellar and I'll explain all. Nice. Thank you. Yeah, so here we are in the cellar of the Blue Boar Inn on Castlegate, and surrounding us is the description of the most famous, notorious highwayman, Dick Turpin. He was hanged in York in 1739, but quite remarkably, he spent one night in this pub, in this cellar, when he was already dead. How did he manage that? Well, he gave the hangman some money, got him to promise that he'd hang him quickly, he wouldn't feel any pain, and he'd bury him in St. George's churchyard. The hangman was a criminal himself and a drunk, and he was loving it. Thousands and thousands of people are coming to watch Turpin die. This is his moment to make fun of Turpin for drinks and coins. And there was Turpin for all he'd done in his life, and he'd done a lot. Here he was being humiliated, made fun of by a drunken hangman. So with a rope round his neck, he couldn't stand any longer. He jumped off and hanged himself. The hangman took his dead body into this cellar and charged people money to see him. His friends found out where he was, broke in through a trapdoor, wrapped his body in a carpet and buried him in St. George's churchyard in York, where he's buried to this day. People can go and pay their respects if they wish. It's a happy place, is this pub. It's a place of reflection. And I think in the cellar, I always say, whatever you do, don't make fun of Dick Turpin, because if you do, something dreadful might happen. What might happen, I've no idea, because I've never made fun of Dick Turpin, but beware.
Are there any stories of anybody who hasn't?
Oh, well, funny enough, I was just talking to the manager quite recently, and he said that somebody had come in and fainted in the cellar, and they'd seen a figure on the stairs. That's just happened quite recently. So people that are sensitive may get more of a feel when they come down here. I'm a storyteller, not a psychic investigator. I've been there when people have done it, but I don't do that. I'm a storyteller. I tell the story as it is.
Now we have time for one final eerie tale before heading home. And for this one, we head to the River Ouse, to a very special plaque which marks the starting place of the original Ghost Walk of York.
Well, the River Ouse takes in all the waters from the Yorkshire Dales. We get massive floods in York. And our meeting place, the King's Arms, is often underwater. One or two buildings around down here claim the same ghost story of a boy. He looks shocked to see you, and you're shocked to see him. He turns and he vanishes, and he always makes his way to the river, and he sort of melts away, dissolves, if you like, before he hits the river. It's called The Lost Boy, and he haunts 5 or 6 places, maybe more. He appears and disappears. The mystery.
We don't know who appears.
No. From what he dressed like, he looks like what they used to call a ragged child. He went to one of the old schools. He's cut off trousers, barefoot, a brownish waistcoat, and white shirt, but not clean, black trousers. It's as if he stepped into our world and we've stepped into his. It's that brief moment and he's gone.
As always, you can visit the places we've talked about in today's episode, and you can actually book onto one of Mark's tours by visiting the original Ghost Walk of York's website, or meet them outside the King's Arms at 8 o'clock. They're there almost every night, but it's worth checking the website in winter or in bad weather. Now links can be found in the show notes below. And whilst you're there, watch out for any boys around you. You never know if they've slipped through time. I'll be back next week with another Eerie excursion, but in the meantime, make sure to follow @Eerie Excursions on Instagram and YouTube, as well as subscribing to the podcast wherever you're listening to make sure you don't miss out on more dark tales from around the UK, which, hey, may even be in a town near you.